Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey!
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, the last in our series of the films of Pablo Larraín with his 2012 political exploration and internet search disaster, No. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel.
And if you're a regular listener of the show and you're interested in supporting our ongoing work investigating great film, please consider a regular donation through our Patreon page at patreon.com/thenextreel. And don't forget, we've got a listener's choice episode coming right up. Patreon patrons are automatically entered into a drawing to tell us what film to discuss and join us on the show to make their case why.
And with that, Andy, we've got a blot spot. Friend of the show, Ben Lott, has written in with his rebound on Postmortem.
Postmortem was another tedious watch for me. Again, I did not care for the actors or the characters they were playing, but more annoying is the fact that so little happens in this film. It's slow and plodding to a fault. The only thing I liked more than Tony Manero was the fact that the lead character wasn't totally despicable. It's better to be bored rather than actively repulsed, I suppose. Your rank 245, my rank 294. Ouch.
Okay. Ouch. Ouch. And what's funny about that is the movie is actually aged even better on me.
Yeah, me too.
I feel like there was stuff we even uncovered between last week's show and this week's show that is probably worth following up on. I mean, there were some crazy sort of bits of sleight of hand in this film that I think changed the way the narrative plays out in my head. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, absolutely. Particularly the as you started pointing out, but neither of us really had a handle on it at the time. The whole idea that Nancy, we actually see that he's taking care of her body early on in the film, and it's kind of like a chronology that Larraín is playing with in the film. It's very strange, especially because I suppose it says a lot, the fact that Mario really doesn't react at all when he's dealing with her body.
Right. And the fact that I'm not entirely sure how the chronology is supposed to play out. Are we supposed to believe that everything that happens in the hospital is after the coup in her house? And that in fact the film is sort of intercut before and after that period? I don't know, but it absolutely makes me rethink the way the film is laid out for us, and makes it that much more interesting to look at. And you actually uncovered a thing about from Larraín and his comment on the last scene from that film.
Yes, Pablo, in an interview with BFI, he said, many people ask, why are guys from your generation talking about this? I can only speak for myself. Chile divides into the people who lived during the military coup and the people who didn't. I didn't. I was born under the dictatorship in 1976 and grew up hearing tales about the coup, which turned into a sealed box, an enigma that captured my imagination. The period is a mystery to me. It's something that you try to understand, but you can never reach. There are still aspects of that time that we need to investigate. The ending of my film is a metaphor for all the crap that Chile has swept under the carpet. So I think that's really interesting that, and I think this is something that he's doing a lot in his films, is he's finding these ways to insert these symbolic moments about what he's saying about Chile into these films and the characters. And perhaps maybe that's why some of them are a little more difficult for us to get into, because we're not understanding some of that symbolism.
Right.
But it adds a really interesting, powerful layer to this film. And like you, I find myself really drawn to this film more and more as time goes by.
I can't argue with Ben about the pacing of the film. It's pretty slow, and I still find myself frustrated by our protagonist. That he's a challenging voice to carry the narrative of the film. But again, it's given me much more to think about than I initially experienced. With that, Andy, I think it's time. Let's do trailers. Sort of exhausted, Andy. My trailer is, of course, just dropped. Blade Runner 2049. Now, I should say, I am very close to Blade Runner, the original film. I am very close to that film. I really love that film, and I think that I am sure that is coloring my opinion of the first official full-length trailer of Denis Villeneuve's take on Blade Runner 2049, starring Harrison
Gosling.
Ford, Ryan Gosling, Ana de Armas, Robin Wright's in it. Jared Leto doesn't have long hair in it. Actually, he does. I think he does again.
He does. And crazy eyes.
And crazy eyes. That's what I got caught up in. And Dave Bautista. Dave Bautista.
Right.
That actually, I'm very excited about that. Screenplay by Hampton Fancher and Michael Green, and a couple more credits there. But, this is, I feel like the trailer delivered exactly what I was afraid of, which is a story that feels fairly predictable, feels like Harrison Ford has been shoehorned into a story that, a beloved story, and may not have quite enough weight to carry. It worries me. I enjoyed Harrison Ford being shoehorned into The Force Awakens, but that was a critique. I'm not sure that, or a critique I heard, I'm not sure that this film needed Harrison Ford. I'm not sure it needed to be made in the first place. I really wanted it to come out and affect me, and I am affected, but I think in the wrong way. I feel like you before The Force Awakens, and this is the backfire effect, where I have been presented with something that challenges my worldview, so I'm doubling down on really not liking it. This is the Steve Sarmento Memorial Kelly Reichardt feeling, which is, and so I know this experience. I am worried about it because I want this to be awesome, and the trailer did not make me feel awesome.
Back when we were talking about Star Wars: The Force Awakens, you were there for me to help see the other side when I had locked my inner child away and wouldn't let him out. Unfortunately, I can't be that person for you, Pete. I feel the same. I think it looks gorgeous. I think Denis Villeneuve is just one of my favorite directors right now. I mean, everything he does is really special in very different ways. I really like most everything that he's done. There's one that stands out as one that I really struggle with, but for the most part, I love everything that he does. I also love Blade Runner. I have just a huge passion for that particular film, and I think that everything looks right. I think everything is just to a T, looks great. I like hearing little hints of some of the Vangelis score kind of coming up. I don't think it's him, but it still has kind of some of the themes that I hear. But the story, like you, really makes me nervous because it just feels like, Hollywood sticking a story in here, especially because I and maybe it's because I'm really concerned because based on how Blade Runner ends, it really, I can't figure out why Harrison Ford is still around. And so I have a lot of concerns about the film in general. And I just don't know what to think about it. I don't want it to be something that they found a way to write around it in order to shoehorn a sequel in.
That's what it feels like, Andy. That's what it feels like.
I know. And it makes me really nervous. So I'm right there with you, and I'm very frustrated because I really want to be excited about it, but I'm going to have to reserve judgment on it until I've seen it and just hope that it's something that ended up being okay.
It's exhausting, man. It's just exhausting. This on the heels of hearing reports that Alien's not looking great. I'm tired. Music on this one is Johan Johansson is an Icelandic composer, and we know him from Theory of Everything and Prisoners, obviously another Villeneuve, and Arrival. I really adored Arrival. I thought the score was really fitting. So we'll see. But you're right. On a very positive note, I do the hints of Vangelis that pop up in the score, at least in the trailer. It feels almost like they used parts of the score. It doesn't. I don't know that we're hearing new music yet, but it was cut funny. So I don't know.
Well, I was wondering if Johan was doing something similar to what they did in Superman Returns, where they took some of John Williams' themes and reintegrated them into the film, which, I'd like to think that they would do that and keep that feel. I will say I got a real kick out of the car flying between or next to the big Atari sign.
The Atari sign.
The reflection. Yeah, that was great.
Release dates on this one, it's going to be one of those great big global releases. Starts in France and Italy on October 4th. October 5th, it opens wide. October 6th, we get it in the U.S., but there are a lot of countries that are going to see this open up until, Hong Kong and Japan get it the 26th and 27th of October. And interestingly, no release date yet for China. So I don't know what that means. Maybe no Chinese money in this film.
That might be it.
That might be it.
Well, my trailer, Pete, is The Big Sick, a romantic comedy that really struck me when I watch it, mainly because there's an honest sense about this trailer. It feels, I had a sense that these characters, everything about it, the story, the characters, was really authentic. And I just loved everything that was happening in this trailer. It just made me so happy to watch this because I love genre films, but I get really excited when I see something that is a genre film, but they're doing something a little different with it. And there was something about the way that this story kind of progressed where, this guy kind of falls for this girl, but then just after they break up, he's trying to make amends. She ends up getting put into a medically induced coma for some illness she's gotten, and then he kind of deals with it and has to deal with it and deal with kind of his relationship with her parents. And it just seemed like this really beautiful story. And I just got super excited watching this trailer. It's directed by Michael Showalter, written by Emily V. Gordon and Kumail Nanjiani, who is in, I've never seen, if you can believe it, Pete, which I'm sure you can, but I've never seen Silicon Valley.
What?
Of which he plays Dinesh, or in which he plays Dinesh. Yes, I've never seen it.
I'm going through it twice now, man. This is round 2.
I've heard nothing but good things. I know. But he was also in Fist Fight recently, and of course he's in the upcoming Lego Ninjago movie playing Jay, which I think is great. But yeah, Kumail plays the love interest in the film with Zoe Kazan, who we talked about recently on our favorite film, Meek's Cutoff. And her parents, of course, Holly Hunter and Ray Romano. This trailer, I got so excited watching this trailer because just from watching this 2.5-minute clip, I felt wholly invested with these characters and just couldn't wait to see what happened with their story. So what do you think of this one?
Oh, I'm totally in. I got very excited when I first saw this trailer. And, I'm such a huge fan of Kumail Nanjiani, and he's a riot. He's also on Doug Love's Movies every now and again. He's doing stand up all the time, and so it's fun to see him like crop up in all of my podcasts. It puts him pretty high on the list of my best friends who have not met me yet, Andy. Like this is a dude I think who would really like us if he had some time to hang out with us. So we're gonna hope those paths cross. Anybody who is listening, if you know Kumail, please put him in touch. We would love to have him on the show, do a little speakeasy, and maybe just hang out and go bowling or something. Whatever you do.
Besties.
Yeah. Oh, we'd be so tight. We would be super tight. I was very excited to see Ray Romano. That one really stuck out to me because he feels like he's sort of transcended the goofy middle-aged guy, and he's moved into this chapter of being the funny stoic dad part. And I think he's particularly well equipped to do that. I think the beard works, like the grumpy straight guy it's a good thing for Ray. So I was very excited to see that. Of course, Holly Hunter. Of all things, this made me think of the Bill Paxton and Glenn Headley in The Circle, like as actors that I really enjoy playing a old married couple that I found myself really attracted to, in that sort of parental respect. I thought that was really great, and this is what I felt in watching the trailer. So with Holly Hunter and Ray. So there you go.
Awesome. Well, this film premiered at Sundance, and it's kind of been making its rounds in the festival circuit, but it's going to have a limited release June 23rd, a bigger release July 14th, but then it'll open between June 23rd and November 16th in a number of countries, including Netherlands, Belgium, the UK, Norway, and right now Germany is the last country that has a release date, November 16th, 2017.
Excellent. Can't wait. Andy, what the hell is a mime doing in the middle of the movie?
Sí, ¿no? Creo que esto no vende.
El presidente va a ganar igual, dejémonos de hueva.
¡Están los presos políticos!
Basta, hay que ser más creativos, carajo. Hay que darle la vuelta a esto.
A mí la democracia me parece entretenida.
Producto alegre, si tú lo planteas así.
Estamos utilizando un lenguaje publicitario, pero armando un concepto político detrás.
Porque sin la dictadura la alegría va a llegar. Vamos a decir que no.
¿Qué chucha hace un mimo en medio de mi película?
We're talking about No, Andy.
Yes.
This is the third in the unofficial trilogy of the story of Allende and Pinochet in Chile, from director Pablo Larraín. Writers Pedro Perrano wrote the screenplay. This is based on the, I believe, unpublished. Is that what we got? I couldn't find it. Unpublished play?
Yeah, it's unpublished play, El Plebiscito by Antonia Zegers.
There we go. Stars Gael García Bernal, Alfredo Castro, again, Antonia Zegers, and more. And it is the story of an advertising executive who is charged with coming up for a campaign to help defeat Augusto Pinochet in the 1988 referendum. And man, does it just scream 80s. How did it hit you, Andy?
Yes, it is very 80s. And, I really enjoyed this film. It was a really interesting glimpse into life kind of at this kind of turning point in a dictatorship. I mean, Pinochet by this time had been running the country about 16 years by the time they had kind of set this whole thing up for this referendum vote and everything. And it was kind of a difficult life for people. And I think this film captured that tone well as far as people who, these different political parties who were kind of content with how things were going, the run-of-the-mill everyday people who were like, no, it's fine, like when they were talking to the maid, and she's just like, no, I'm fine with him. It's, my kids are in school, I've got a job, and, she kind of is okay, kind of shrugging her shoulders and dismissing any of the bad things that might have happened. It really painted an interesting portrait of life at this time and just how complicated it was and how frightening it was with this whole idea of, hey, this dictator is letting us have a vote. I mean, how strange is that for a dictator to all of a sudden have this idea, and how kind of uncomfortable it was for people on that side creating this no campaign. Because they were all of a sudden put in the spotlight and they were being followed and you didn't know. I mean, people, if a dictator says, yeah, go out and vote, if you vote no, does the dictator all of a sudden like have your name and are you going to be found dead? I mean, I don't know. It's this interesting portrait of a society. And I really liked it. I enjoyed kind of this glimpse through the eyes of this ad exec. And really, I also enjoyed the glimpse of the advertising world and its how uncomfortable it is as a bedfellow with politics, but how it works in frightening ways.
Are you a This American Life listener?
I have listened to it.
Like today?
Not today.
The past couple of weeks, they did a recipe. They did an episode on the experience of living in Russia and supporting Vladimir Putin. And I could not help but notice the parallels because the grandmothers on the street in these interviews say literally the same words. Those days are behind us. He's a singer, he's a dancer, he's a very strong man. I mean, it's like the same propaganda that that we see in this film at this time. We're seeing right now in Russia. There's a little bit of an aside, but it was just a fascinating kind of exploration of parallels between these two stories. There were some things that I really liked. The one that I want to shout out just right now, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again, it's the visual treatment of the film, and I'm deeply torn on it. What they elected to do, and I think they did the last two films as well, right, is they treat the film or shot the film in such a way that it looks of the period. So in this case, we're now in the 80s, and so it is shot using the same technology that was used to shoot, broadcast advertising for broadcast television. And so they're lugging around these 3/4-inch tapes, they've got these big libraries of tapes, and that's what you can imagine them filming on. And I thought it was clever. But man, eventually I found it super distracting, and there are pieces of it that certain sequences where the fringing and the highlights are just such that you almost can't even look at the screen if you're watching it on a larger television. So I had a tough time with that. The cultural implications of this film I thought were particularly touching. This whole parallel between the American dream and the Chilean dream. That we have this one sequence where the team is coming together and they have this message. Anyone can be rich. You can't lose when everyone is betting on the same thing, right? The dream of opportunity is not the same as a dream of a guarantee. And they were playing with that in a lot of the messages that they came up with. I thought that was really fantastic. But the biggest piece that I found haunting and funny and ultimately disappointing is the influence of American media culture now on the Chilean Chilean political culture. We've talked about the impact of the American cultural sort of regime in the last two movies as portrayed in those films. And Tony Manero is the entertainment culture through Saturday Night Fever. And then, in Postmortem, it was the much more sort of understated but always looming CIA backing of the coup in Chile, as demonstrated in Postmortem. And here it is advertising, and the way the film portrays advertising as being modeled off of this new modern style that you see in America is something that I found really almost grotesque. The fact that that influence helped define ultimately a positive outcome for the country, it haunts me.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because it certainly was something that the film was criticized for when it came out. I mean, there are, a couple critics in Chile. One was a Chilean political science professor who was concerned if they should really be celebrating the moment that political activism turned into marketing rather than a discussion of principles, which was a big one. And then the other critic that I read said that they accused the film of simplifying the history, and in particular focusing exclusively on the TV ad campaign, ignoring the grassroots voter registration they did, really trying to get people around the country to vote. So the film really did focus on that. And I mean, Larraín defended his film, saying it's not a documentary, it's art, it's not a testament, it's just the way that we looked at it. I think to that end, it speaks to how Larraín really makes his films and enters these worlds. And I did finally watch Jackie, and he does the same thing there, where you're seeing a big moment, but through very specific eyes. And I really appreciate that in the films that and the way that he does that in his films and the way that he did it here. I definitely see your point, and I can see that, yes, there is this frightening element to the fact that politics, it's turning into this marketing machine, and it's really scary how that change happens, and people bite off on it so well. I mean, to the point where they kick out the dictator in Chile, and I mean it's really interesting the way that all works. I don't know if it bothered me though as much as it bothered you though.
No, and I should say it didn't bother me, and I don't even find that a critique. That's one of the things that makes it such a compelling discussion of the period. I don't hold it against the film at all. In fact, I really applaud the film for taking on this period from that perspective. And the fact that I find it a little bit disgusting is actually a compliment to the film. I think it portrayed exactly what it needs to portray.
Gotcha. When you said disappointing earlier, I thought you were disappointed in the way that it did it.
No, Andy, let me be clear. I'm disappointed in humanity.
Right. Well, now I get it.
I made a comment in the notes about mimes, and it wasn't really a significant comment, but I do think that the mime for me becomes, there are two really important symbols actually. The mime is one, and the microwave is another, right? These are symbols on the opposite ends of the spectrum here, where on one end we have a mime which ultimately represents the most frivolous, the most vapid, the most empty symbol of entertainment engagement as portrayed here. No offense to those who mime, but mimes are not portrayed as terribly weighty symbols of American excellence in this film. On the other hand, we have microwaves where they're just being introduced. They're working on a campaign for microwaves in their ad agency, and they're so excited about microwaves, and they're in the melted cheese and the hot cheese sandwiches, and everything's great until they get to the shoot, and he actually says under his breath, best not to stand right there. The radiation will kill you. Okay, here's the great symbol of innovation is also a death wish. So congratulations. And that actually mirrors the experience of the film for me, which I think it's really great.
Well, and also I just found it so interesting in talking about kind of advertising and just selling product, how politics becomes this product. You start, not to jump into our first shot, last shot, but you start the film and end the film with these pitches that he has, and it's essentially the exact same pitch. And as he's selling these different products at the beginning of the film, you get another one in the middle, and it's kind of the same pitch in the middle too. But this is when he's pitching to the no campaigners the direction that they want to go with the video campaign, and it's kind of, I guess, eye-opening, maybe to a certain extent, that this is how he views the world, as just a way to sell a product, and he sees this whole idea of no as another product that he's selling. I mean, I think he may believe it more, and want to kind of, in the end, he wants to see this change, but at the same time, it's like it still is just a product. And it speaks volumes to kind of how he sees the world and his look at everything, but also just this frightening look at advertising and how everybody has gotten a handle on how to sell things, and you certainly see that in our country with politics. I mean, it's just very clear how politics has kind of infested all of these different things, and advertising is the driving force behind it.
Can I just say, as an aside, Andy, you sent me a picture in Slack. Would you describe that picture?
I sent you a picture of Pinochet dead.
Well, that's really not selling the real aesthetic of the picture.
Well, it's a woman leaning over his the coffin, looking through the glass at his dead body.
Yeah, I think is she kissing it? The glass.
I don't know if she's
cover?
kissing or just examining it closely to see, is he really dead, or is she going to spit on it? I don't know, but I found the picture so interesting because of that particular person leaning over, and I don't know. To me, it spoke volumes of Pinochet and kind of this interesting life that he had within the country.
I thought it was moving. I didn't know why you sent it. I thought maybe there was an off chance that you wanted me to see just how much Pinochet looked like Pat Morita. And the answer,
I didn't make that connection, but thank you.
The answer to that question, Andy, is a lot.
Oh, poor Pat.
Can we talk just a little bit about the script? Pedro Peirano? What do you think? Is that pretty close?
Pedro Peirano, yeah.
Pedro Peirano did the adaptation, as you've already mentioned, based on the unpublished play El Plebiscito, The Referendum by Antonio Scarmeta. What did you think of the structure of the play, of the script?
I liked how it took this our protagonist Rene, and we see this journey that he goes on of becoming this part of this campaign. We see this relationship he has with his boss, and how and his boss, who happens to be doing pretty much the exact same position before the Yes campaign. We see his relationship with Veronica, his I don't know if she was his ex-wife or his girlfriend, but whoever it is, she is the mother of his son. And we kind of see that relationship, which is interesting because she is kind of a political rebel, which I found really interesting. And his relationship with his son. And we get kind of these different relationships, and also just everybody on the No campaign, but we see his life through these different spectrums, and it's really interesting to see how it all kind of plays out. I enjoyed how the script kind of danced around with all those different worlds, and I really enjoy the way that it incorporates so much of the Yes and No campaigns into the script, and we get to see a lot of the actual videos that they had done, the creation of those videos, the conversations about the videos, and kind of the back and forth changing of their plans to kind of compensate to attack the other video, things like that. I thought it was actually really well structured, and it had some moments that really just struck me. And I think one of the big ones was just kind of seeing Renee after the victory at the end, and just kind of that moment of, the way that he reacts. It's so quiet compared to everybody else, and it really struck me as this interesting way to kind of take something in like this, where it's almost like he was involved in it, but he never seemed like, so much of the political persuasion. Like he couldn't even name like the different political parties that represented the colors and all that. It's just like one of those things like, well, okay, well, I did it. My campaign was a success, but what does it really mean? And it's almost like he wasn't even sure. And I found that really interesting. And so seeing those elements coming through in this story, I found very strong. So I really enjoyed this script.
Yeah, I agree with you, and particularly the characters. And as you talk about the character of Renee, part of this is because we have somebody as sort of adept at these sorts of characters as Gael García Bernal playing it, but part of it really is that this was a character that was written with a number of different angles that are important, right? They're important in terms of demonstrating who this character is. As you mentioned, we get to see who he is, not because he tells us who he is, but because we see him not be able to name the political parties. We see him do the same sort of campaign over and over and over again, but because of this character's sort of panache and in speaking to executives, he's able to sell them that this is an original idea every time he does it. He really is ultimately kind of a one-trick pony in the advertising business who has experienced some success, but for what? Almost as vapid and empty as the products he's selling. And it is only when he sort of this character has to face the fact that it's his boss and partner at the ad agency that has been asked to do the other side of this thing, that he gets interested in trying to do some things and ends up aligning with a team that is that can help him create this vision. But we are celebrating and we are supporting a character that isn't all that talented. I mean, talk about a guy who has ultimately failed up into a position of notoriety.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at his character and how he kind of has gotten to this place. But I think that's what's funny about some of these worlds, like advertising and I mean, just even the film world. I mean, there are plenty of people in these worlds who do that, who end up in these high up positions just by circumstance. And you always wonder, like, God, how did that person get to where they are?
Truly.
And he certainly could be that way. I mean, you see when he's making the commercial for the soda pop, and then at the end we have this kind of terrible. It's like almost like a fake news commercial for this soap opera, and it's like that's. Yeah, somebody paid a lot of money to get that stuff made, and he made a lot from it because they think that he's the best.
Well, what's interesting too about that is that it shows how empty the disagreement is between him and his partner, right? That they were frustrated by each other and making their own little moves, but in fact, at the end, they were still together doing their own thing, selling their own products, making their vapid templated commercial spots, and as strong as they may have convinced themselves that they felt about these products, they didn't demonstrate anything more than the political campaign being just another job.
Yeah, very true. It's interesting, and I like that about it.
Me too.
It's just a very interesting way to tell this story. And I think Pablo, as the director, having seen these three films, it's just nice seeing how he kind of he's a director who really likes to experiment and try things. And I mean, there are things that he seems to fall back on quite a bit. The jump cuts, he still consistently keeps up with the jump cuts throughout this film. But
I gotta interject. It's the sin of the brainstorm, Andy. These jump cuts drive me batty. And he is certainly not the only director to make these choices with the script, but this makes me crazy. I'm going to describe it. Tell me that you know what I'm talking about. We have two characters that are obviously about to engage in a montage. They are brainstorming together about something. If you just read the script, The script, it would be like one conversation that never ends, right? It's a long, seamless conversation that goes from idea to idea to idea and logically builds on itself. And it feels like that conversation could take place in about 2 or 3 minutes. And between these two people sitting in a room on a couch, side by side, it would be fine. But when you watch the film, it turns out every other line, they smash cut to another location at another time of day, as if these people said 2 lines, then went and got in a car, drove someplace else, not speaking at all, so that they could pick up the conversation exactly where they left off, 10 miles away at sundown. And that makes me insane.
I totally know what you mean, and I thought the exact same thing. I just kept writing on my paper, more jump cutting, more jump cutting. No, it is one of those montage, like conversation montage elements that I always struggle with in films for that exact reason, because it's a nonsensical way to have a conversation, and really, I think filmmakers do it only to kind of break up something that otherwise would be fairly monotonous. And it's interesting, I guess, to visually break it up that way, but it doesn't work when you actually think about the context of it. So it's a cinematic trick that I think for us doesn't necessarily work.
It's a cinematic trick. It could go back to the script too. Like this could be written around, assuming that you write the conversation as if time has passed. You know what I mean? Like there are ways to get through this and make it feel like we're actually making progress. And this didn't, and it happened several times throughout the film. Anyway, you were saying.
Well, as I was saying, it is certainly something that Larraín falls back on as one of kind of the tropes. But I do like that he continues to experiment, and I in particular, you talked about the look of the film and that video, that kind of that U-matic tape format that they filmed this with, that really lent beautifully, I thought, to the film. As much as I struggled with it in the beginning, by the time I hit the ending, I was just in love with it. I thought it was a great choice. But it's it's an interesting way to kind of create this world. And I like that Larraín is finding these ways to kind of experiment and play around with and tell stories in ways that make a lot of sense. I also really appreciated that he found ways, and by using this video format, he found ways to kind of bring real archival footage into the mix of everything that he was doing, that you couldn't tell, like where reality began and the fictional film work began. And it was, I loved it. And so that's something that he did here that I thought made this feel like just wholly authentic. I loved it.
That is a really great point, because it's sort of a trick of the eye, right? Where, I would notice it where we would have what looked like an older actor dressed in a suit, and he would be talking. He'd be like the news. There's a news broadcaster in the part of the No campaign, and we see him a number of times. And he's an older actor. He would be talking to Renee off camera, and then he would immediately turn into the broadcast camera that he's about to start his broadcast. And then we cut to the television watching him, and it's a younger guy. And you're thinking, that's not right. What is that all about? Now, if I understand this right, please educate me. I think that is the same guy, but now, of course, it's 20 years later, 25 years later, right?
It absolutely was. They did that with a number of people, where they actually cast some of the real players in their roles, and that particular person that you're talking about, I think, happens to be, if I can remember the name right, Patricio Aylwin, who became, after this whole thing, he was the first person elected as president of Chile democratically after Pinochet did this whole thing. And so he actually participated in the film and played himself. And and what they did is they cut to the footage of him in the film. But yes, you can tell like he's very much younger. But they did that a lot. They found the real people. Like when you have the women singing the song, those were the real singers that did it back in like 20 some years ago. And they did that all through it. And I found that really interesting, especially those moments like what you're talking about, where they cut from the real guy now to the real guy then. It's an interesting way to kind of blend this fiction and the reality. And I think it was just really sharp,
super effective. And I feel like we have to call that as a stamp, like a Larraín stamp, because he's done these kinds of tricks where he's played with time in terms of the narrative. Now he's played with time in terms of the participants in the real story as he's telling this true story. And I think that is an incredibly engaging trick, and it is not showy at all. I mean, it's not something that he's like. It's not like Michael Bay's explosion stamp. It is super subtle and really makes you watch closely. And I found that really engaging and deep into the narrative as a result.
And he does that also in Jackie, where he'll cut to some archival footage, and then he'll cut to the actors and everything, almost like it's a newsreel footage. And I tell you, it's a really effective way to just help really paint this world. I mean, it's a very effective tool that he's kind of been developing here.
Shall we talk first shot, last shot?
Yes, the first shot, after we have our titles on this on paper, which was a great way to kind of do it, and the setup of history of Pinochet and Chile at the time, we get a 1.5 minute close-up of Gael's character René doing his advertising pitch, setting up the audience and the clients to view this new rough spot that they've cut together for free soda.
And the last shot, we have yet another pitch. He is pitching to his clients and prepping them for this soap opera's fake news ad that they've done, where the beautiful women are on top of this building, and the helicopter comes in with the heartthrob in it, carrying some flowers. We cut to another close-up of René as he watches it. And afterward, we, as the film ends, we cut to the credits, and it's again the great sort of paper, lifting the paper pad of paper to do the main credits, and cut to a post or sort of mid-credit roll, which is the transition away from Pinochet.
I like the connection here to advertising and politics, and just it's really, you set up the world of the political story that we have here, but then you get this advertising salesman doing his just an incredible job of selling you, and his pitch is just this. It's like Chile is ready for this, and it sounds like he's doing kind of a political pitch, and then you see what he's pitching, and you're like, oh, yeah, okay.
Well, and I think it's funny and symbolic that the soda is actually called free soda, and the very last shot of the film is the country going essentially free of the reign of Pinochet.
Yes.
That's it. I may be reaching for that one, but it feels good. It feels good to stretch like
but
that.
It's there.
Yeah.
It's there. Yeah. No, I think it's just a nice open and close on him as we're kind of really seeing him in his world. Everything around him can change, but here he is still doing these meaningless pitches to his clients.
Let's run through just a couple of members of the cast, particularly the cast that we've seen before. Those are the ones I'm really interested in. Obviously, we've mentioned Gael García Bernal as our protagonist, René Saavedra.
He's an actor we've talked about before. Another just really talented actor from Mexico. Who? We talked about him on Blindness.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that we talked about him in, or was that it?
I think that's the only thing we've really talked about him in, but we also like a lot of the other stuff he's done. I mean, I'm a infrequent viewer of Mozart in the Jungle, of course, Y Tu Mama Tambien, and Amores Perros and Motorcycle Diaries. I mean, they're all films that we like him in, that we've talked about before. But I think this is the only film we've done.
Oh, other than Blindness.
Yeah. Other than Blindness. Yeah. Thank goodness we have this one too. Woof.
Blindness was so loved by you.
Cleanse the old Blindness palette.
Oh, so funny. He is somebody who's worked with Pablo after this. He was in Neruda, about Pablo Neruda, and Luis Ñeco was in that also, and Jaime Vidal was in that also, and Diego Munoz. A lot of people returned to work with him. Alfredo Castro, of course. I think that Gael just has this personality that works well for the ad exec. He sells, and I love that about him in this particular film. He works so well. He's likable. He's somebody that he can do this ad pitch, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I totally buy it. He does that well. I also love the sense of family that he had in the story, though, and I think there's a real bond between him and his son that I really connected with. And it really, his relationship, constantly struggling relationship with his ex Veronica, was really touching. In particular, the scene when he gets that call, that kind of threatening call in the middle of the night, and he takes his son over to her place, and he sees her live-in lover, and leaves the son to keep him safe. But as he's walking away, you just get this close-up of his face, and it's just like, it's so broken and hurt. And I think that there's just so much connection through his eyes, and I think that's something that Gael really excels at. I just found so much connection with him in this film.
I kept seeing him on screen and feeling like he was playing a really multi-layered character. Like he was an introvert, right? He was struggling with figuring out his own personal motivation to get up and get in front of people, and this is what he was good at. But when he was not, pitching to somebody, he would go somewhere else and try to figure out how to recharge. And I just really like that angle of him, as as something I felt like I could really connect with. He's in pre-production right now as Zorro. Did you know that?
No, really? That's interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah, and get a load of this. The screenplay and is written by, and the film will be directed by Jonas Cuarón, son of Alfonso Cuarón, and they worked together on Gravity. And so it's
and Desierto.
He wrote Desierto. So it should be interesting. It's in pre-production. Obviously, a lot can change, but it looks like Bernal is slated for the title character. The film is just called Z.
That is exciting. I love that.
I think so too. I'm very excited about that. Okay, Alfredo Castro is back as Lucho Guzman.
Alfredo. It's funny. I actually liked him in this film, but I still was like, man, I want to see him play somebody that is a real likable character because he's a really interesting character here. And I thought there was a really interesting relationship between him and Renee. But at the same time, I just like, but he's still kind of, he's not the antagonist, so to speak, but he is still kind of an antagonistic character for Renee. And, it was interesting. And, honestly, it was kind of a little heartbreaking at the end when there's the big party with all the yes people and he kind of calls and they didn't invite him. And he's just like, oh, okay. It's so pathetic.
He was pathetic, but I thought he was a breath of fresh air compared to the last two movies with him, and it shows that he can play just a different character, even if he's not likable. He's just different. This was a very different role, and I thought that was what a relief. To actually see someone on screen that I liked, even though I didn't like, because I think you could call me a fan. I think he is a talented actor, and I think he picks roles that are intentionally sort of emotionally challenging, and it takes craft to do that. But this role, it was, I think, essentially a more straightforward role, but one that was equally pivotal. We needed to have the balance. On the other end of the fulcrum there. We need between Saavedra to work together. What I like so much about them together is that you could see that they cared about the project. It felt like they cared about this whole project for the sake of the project, even if they didn't necessarily care about the outcome. Guzman was already invested and involved in the Yes group, so you feel like he's already a political machine, and Saavedra was acting in response to that in some respect, but still, they came back together to work together, and that I found really satisfying.
Yeah, I did too. I was a little questioning of his motivations when, toward the end, when Renee shows up and Lucho says something about, you better be careful of what happens with your son. And it's just like, is he involved in the threats? I don't know. It just kind of threw me. I'm like, is there more to his character that I wasn't realizing? All of a sudden, it kind of piqued my curiosity. Like maybe there's more. But then they continue working together, and so I was like, okay. So I couldn't quite figure out exactly what was going on with that relationship, but I felt like there was some really interesting stuff at work within it, regardless.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think it's really telling that ends up being kind of a MacGuffin, right? That relationship. He very well, to my ear, was actually just warning him, right, as a friend and colleague,
which is entirely possible,
Yeah.
and that's what was interesting about it. Yeah.
Who else do you want to talk about on this list here?
Well, Antonia Zegers, we should talk about her. We talked about her in the last film, Postmortem. She plays Veronica, Renee's ex. I thought that was a really interesting relationship, and I enjoyed her in the film. I enjoyed that she was kind of this free-spirited political beast who was not afraid to speak her mind and get beaten up and thrown in jail. But at the same time, had this obvious connection with Renee because of their son Simone. I found it just really interesting, and how some people will live these lives where they're, what the message is more important than their family, and it was kind of a touching and powerful and heartbreaking, kind of seeing that, and how it affected Renee, who so clearly was still taken by her and affected by her and wanted to protect her, but also was so frustrated by her. It made for a really interesting character and relationship that you don't see very often. So I really enjoyed her in the film.
Absolutely agree. Jaime Vidal, who played Minister Fernandez. He was Dr. Castillo in Postmortem. So we've seen him before. I like him.
That's right.
I liked him then.
I like him. I liked him in the role as the minister. It was just fun to see kind of that. I don't know. I think there's something really just awful. I think my favorite bit was when he was eating the orange. He picks that orange off the little tree, and he's having that conversation with Lucho, and he's peeling the orange, and he stuffs all the peel into the end of the cannon. and then Lucho kind of, sees what he's doing, and then he just kind of pushes it farther down the cannon, like sweeping stuff under the rug. It's just like, that was a great little
subtle,
a great little moment there.
Yeah.
And stuffing it into a cannon of all things, it just, it's like, it's such a, an awful device. And here they are, like sweeping it under the rug into the cannon. Said a lot.
Yeah, truly. Now we've already talked about the fact that we've had we have a lot of folks who were really involved in the true events of the period that were on set.
Yeah, not just some of the real people like the president, Patricio Aylwin, but I mean other actual people, Chileans, Patricio Bañados, Carlos Caselli, Florcita Motuda. They all play themselves and also appear in archival footage. But then you have a lot of people from the Real No campaign. Gael García Bernal's character is based on two people. Both of them appear in the film. And a whole bunch of other no campaigners appear in the film. Most often, though, they appear as yes campaigners, which I think was just kind of a little bit of fun that they were having. And then you have a bunch of other real people who are just playing themselves, which, I think it was just a really interesting idea to kind of blend the reality into this. And they filmed in a lot of the real locations where stuff actually happened. So on some of the real sets that still are around, I mean, it was interesting how much they were able to kind of tap into the realities of what was going on during this campaign 27 years ago.
And we have famous people. How weird was it to see what the famous person montage?
That was really, really interesting and kind of frighteningly enlightening to see which famous people, speaking famous U.S. people from here, showed up to support Pinochet, like Jimmy Carter and Jimmy Swaggart. But then it was nice to see the actors, Richard Dreyfuss, Jane Fonda, and Christopher Reeve, showing up in support of the No campaign. So that was interesting little,
very funny bit. Let's talk just a little bit about getting it made. In particular, let's come back around here, round 3, with cinematographer Sergio Armstrong. I think you and I have exactly inverse opinions of their choice of film treatment.
Right, you loved it and then grew tired of it.
Yeah.
I was like doubting it as an idea, and then I started loving it.
It turns out you were only half right.
Well, I still think it's fantastic. And actually, what I loved about that kind of U-matic look is the way that it kind of made the colors kind of mush together, and like when you'd get a light in the frame, how it just kind of everything just like blew away. It was so hot that it just kind of like the image would just explode. I really enjoyed it, but in particular, I think the reason for it was to blend all this archival footage into it, and I think that helped so much just create this world. So I'm all for it.
To be fair, the other thing that it does, or the other thing that they were able to do with it, is not just to connect it to the past, but also to the overall production design and the art design of the entire campaign supporting the movie. Right? I mean, all of the poster material, everything has that sort of fringe look, like where with color separations that feel just like the fringing that you get when the light's coming in sideways on the film. I thought it was really interesting that I'm looking at the cover of the box that looks exactly like the and the logo design, and it all looks exactly like what I'm looking at on screen, and I thought that was really cool.
One note that I will say, the Hollywood Reporter did say in their when they were talking about this film, that they argued that the decision probably lessened the film's chances commercially and with Oscar voters. And I will say, watching this film, this was the first of the trilogy that was available to me on Blu-ray to watch. And I will say, it was funny
ironic.
Watching this beautiful Blu-ray image that really looked on par with the DVD quality images of the last two films. So I do think that the Hollywood Reporter may have something.
That's so funny.
May have something with that, yeah.
Production design, hair and makeup, costumes. I mean, everything that goes in to painting this film into the period, and I think we can say the entire trilogy excels in this regard. This felt like 1988 to me, and I think you and I mean, 1988 was kind of central to us. We were like right there. That's practically when we became sentient.
I will say, the fact that Gael had a rat tail said everything about the success of these departments. Yes.
That we're going to go to Margarita Marchi and the hair and makeup. She was makeup. But anyway, it was great. Andrea Cignoli is back in the editor's booth. Probably the most challenging edit of the three films.
Yeah, I mean, we've already talked about how complicated it is, taking this archival footage and intercutting it with all the recreations, or I guess it's not really recreations, but real footage that they're creating of, okay, here, let's create a police, spraying everybody down in the streets and beating people in the streets. Now let's take some footage and we'll cut that in, and figuring out how to, one, shoot around that and kind of find ways to kind of, okay, we got to shoot this angle here because we have this other footage here. But then also for her to find the right ways to edit it. It was really incredible and impressive. So I really enjoyed the work done here.
Now you have you dove in to the history, and we have a little bit of history to report. I think the entire timeline of Pinochet's rule.
Just for our listeners, I knew some about Pinochet, but I didn't really know, kind of much in detail. So after watching all these films, I'm like, we've kind of explored quite a bit of the period of Pinochet as the dictator of Chile from 1973 to 1989, I think, or 90. I found him to be kind of a fascinating character. So I wrote a few things down, just a few. This particular story ended this 16 and a half years in power. The fact, this is a quote from Wikipedia, the fact that the dictatorship respected the results is attributed to pressure from the big business, the international community, and unease with extended Pinochet rule within the dictatorship. So I think that speaks a lot to kind of how he only really did this whole crazy let's vote and see if I should stay in power for another 8 years thing because of a lot of pressure he was getting from around the world. So it speaks to a dictator kind of like, I don't know, weirdly paying attention to stuff. So, but this is a guy, he was Salvador Allende's commander-in-chief of the army as of August 23rd, 1973. He took power September 11th, 1973 in a U.S.-backed coup d'etat, leading a military junta of 4 people that deposed democratically elected socialist president Salvador Allende. And this junta was sworn in that night, and the next day they drafted a document suspending the Constitution and Congress, establishing this junta as the supreme authority. This is what happens in the world of dictatorships. He was sworn in as the first president, and the 4 members of the junta, they agreed verbally to rotate as president. Then they established this advisory committee with which he ended up filling in with his supporters. And then one of the first things they do is they vote to eliminate the idea of rotating leaders because they said it'll cause too much red tape, thereby making him the only one who is going to be leading. Oh, those sneaky dictators.
So
the things that they do. Yes. He pretty much said, 6 months later, we're never going back to civilian rule. There's no plans for that. And then December 18th, 1974, he's declared supreme leader of the nation.
That's sounding a little bit familiar again.
Right. I know, isn't it? He remained, after this, after he was voted out of office, he still remained commander-in-chief of the Chilean army until 1998, and he was a senator for life in accordance with his 1980 constitution that he had come up with. However, he was arrested under an international arrest warrant in London, October 10th, 1998, in connection with numerous human rights violations. He was released on grounds of ill health, returned to Chile in 2000. In 2004, a judge ruled he was healthy enough to go on trial, and then by the time he died in 2006, there were about 300 criminal charges that were still pending against him in Chile for numerous human rights violations during his rule, plus tax evasion and embezzlement during and after his rule. He was accused of having corruptly amassed at least $28 million. Despite the indictment and 300 arrests, he only served time in house arrest. And then, just to put everything in perspective, during the period of Pinochet's rule, various investigations have identified the murder of 1,200 to 3,200 people, with up to 80,000 people forcibly interned and as many as 30,000 tortured. According to the Chilean government, the official number of deaths and forced disappearances stands at 3,095. So
that really helps. Back to the film, it helps to paint the context of why it was so challenging for this young man, played by Bernal, to come in and demonstrate his awareness of what happened in Chile during this period, with such a happy, fun, frivolous campaign. And one of the most striking sequences to me was when the elder gentleman, part of the No campaign, stood up and ended up swearing his way out of the room because he felt so incensed and offended by that approach. Why can't we focus on the crimes that were committed here? His perspective. And I thought that was really chilling.
Oh, absolutely. And how it really, it was offensive that, this is what you're going to do when, I've had, people that I know and love, disappear or killed, and this is how we're going to go about this. I mean, I would be offended too. And it speaks, frighteningly just to the world of advertising and how it's not about that. It's about this different thing and just appealing to people in ways that you wouldn't expect, but it really kind of can diminish the actual story.
So given all of the horrendous atrocities, how'd it do at awards season?
Left turn. Oh, this is it's a strong film. It had 13 wins, 15 other nominations. This was the first Chilean film to be nominated for Best Foreign Language Film. It was nominated that year. It lost to Amor, which was quite the popular film that year. At the Cannes Film Festival, Pablo won the CICAE Award, which is the International Confederation of Art Cinemas, which is a French organization, a nonprofit that supports and promotes art film. So he won that. And then at the Altazor Awards, the Chilean Film Awards, Jaime Vidal won Best Actor for his performance as the minister.
Outstanding. And, when we think about his budgetary performance and your deep and deepening relationship with Pablo Larraín's brother and producer, what did we find out?
Well, unfortunately, once again, I haven't been able to get anything out of him. There's no budget info anywhere online I could find. The movie premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 2012 before opening in Chile on August 9th, 2012, and in the U.S. on February 15th, 2013. I think the casting of Gael García Bernal and the Oscar nomination helped boost the box office take of this one, as it went on to make almost 2.3 million domestically and 2.9 internationally, at least what I could find, making for an adjusted gross of about 5.5 million. That's pretty much all I could find, though.
Well, here's hoping it did better than that, because I think it deserves to have done better than that, Andy. Let's rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel, or just swipe over in your podcast app of choice and hit the Flickchart link, and it will take you right over to No on Flickchart. And you'll want to do that because searching for No on any of these sites is disastrous. Just trust us, follow the links.
I think people should try just to see how
search
hard
for
it
the
is to
word
find this
No
film.
on the internet and see if you could find this movie. Go ahead. Do that. That's an exercise. Oh, the internet is the worst.
It sure is.
Where do we start?
All right, first up, we have No or Hot Fuzz.
Oh,
As much as I appreciated No, I'm going with Hot Fuzz. No or La Femme Nikita. Haven't seen that pop up in quite a while.
I would choose No.
I'm going to say No. Absolutely. No or Gremlins. It's totally Gremlins for me.
Really?
It's a childhood thing, man.
It's
I'm not going to be able to let go of that one.
Okay, we're going to have to do it.
Here we go.
I'm No. Okay, here we go.
1, 2, 3.
Rock. Paper. First one. I am shamed.
I took it there. All right. No or Gallipoli. Wow, that hasn't popped up in a little while.
Truly. I am No on this one.
I am No also. All right, next up, No or The Bourne Legacy. If it were any of the other Bourne films, I would pick it, but it's Legacy. I'm going to go with No.
Yeah, I'm going to go with No.
No or La Vie en Rose.
Again, La Vie en Rose was a beautiful performance in a movie that wasn't as beautiful. I am No.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to say No. No or Sophie's Choice.
Oh, that's ironic. I am No, with all due respect to Meryl Streep.
Yes, I'm going to say No. No or King's Row. Little Ronnie Reagan.
No.
I'm going to say No. All right, man. That puts it at 190 on our chart. 190 out of 302. That's pretty high for our Pablo Larraín series.
Yeah, that's not bad. That Hot Fuzz, the Hot Fuzz block is tough.
It really is. That's a hard one.
Because we're rarely going to rock, paper, scissors on Hot Fuzz.
That's
you know what
true.
I mean? Well, what does that do for your Letterboxd review? And this has been a lot of fun because I feel like I tried. I feel like I need a rule where I need to not read your Letterboxd review before we talk about it.
Well, I'm debating if I'm going to start writing them after we've had our conversations.
Me too.
For the exact same reason.
Did you? So you read mine before you?
No, I didn't.
You didn't. See, I did.
I abstained.
You abstained. Well, I will say I did not read your review until I had written and posted my review. I thought that was enough.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's
but I'm gratified to hear that we largely agreed.
Yeah, I have 3.5 out of 5 for me on this one.
I was a strong 4 stars and a like.
I definitely was a like for me too. This, I think that Pablo can make really great films. And if anything that I've discovered while watching this particular series, while he can make some really challenging films that I never want to watch again, like Tony Manero, he can also make some still challenging films like Postmortem that I definitely want to watch again. And he can also do some really fascinating films like No or even Jackie that I find so exciting and interesting. He's a filmmaker that I think can do a lot of really interesting stuff with the medium. And I mean, now I'm looking at his body of work and I want to go back and fill it in. I want to see all the rest of the stuff that he's done.
I do too, because I feel like what we've watched is a progression of his development as a filmmaker. And I am really excited about it. I wish that I wish that we knew what was coming up after Jackie, right? Because his is now a name that I am looking for. In filmmaking, we've seen him go from films that were, a little bit unfocused, films that were unengageable in Tony Manero for me, to films that offer, surprisingly smart structure, to just nailing all the hard choices for me and still making a film that's entertaining, that's well paced, that is something that I can dive into and want to learn more about, that is tricking me in all the right ways. I am super into Pablo Larraín at this point. And I'll tell you, here's an interesting aside. I had the opportunity today to interview a professor from Chile, from Santiago, who moved here. He's a professor at Berkeley, and he moved to the United States in 1984. And to do various things. He's been back and forth to Chile. He lived in London for a while, but he essentially left Chile in 1984 and to teach. And I told him before we started, I said, "Are you a movie fan, Professor?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, I do another podcast. It's a movie podcast, and we're wrapping up our series on Pablo Larraín and before I could even say the title of the film, he said, "No. Oh, we really like that movie." I thought that was very cool, especially for a guy who ended up in his formative years living through that in Santiago. And we didn't have an opportunity to go into any of that detail, but I'm deeply curious now what that life was like. So
absolutely,
it's interesting, and it just makes me all that much more interested in more of Pablo Larraín's stories. They are super fun. Super fun. Man,
Pablo Larraín equals super fun.
I turned off before the last two words came out of my mouth, and that's what's always cocked and ready to go. Super fun.
That's fantastic.
I am an idiot. Where do we go from here, Andy?
Well, we are going to be returning to Japan to dig back into our Hayao Miyazaki series that we started November of 2015, if you can believe it was that long ago.
I cannot.
I know, I can't either when I was looking. We're going to be looking at the three films arguably considered his greatest: Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, and Howl's Moving Castle. Should be fun.
You may ask yourself, if these are arguably his greatest films, why did we start with those other films? What would we say to that?
Oh,
Andy?
Pete, who would ask something like that?
I remember talking about it. I just don't remember an answer. Did we come to an answer in 2015?
We looked at the first of his career, the last of his career, and one in the middle that was right. a well-loved one.
That was right.
That's kind of the reason that last series ended up the way it did. And I still enjoy it. I think it's an interesting series and an interesting way to kind of look at the really kind of the variety of stuff across his career. But this one is really kind of hitting a particular point when he was really just kind of knocking stuff out of the park.
And you have to remember, when we came up with that last series for November 2015, it was probably in November 2014 that we were even talking about it. So we're entirely different people at that point and made entirely different decisions. So anyway, I'm very excited about it. I can't wait to dig into these movies, and I think I'll drag the kids in. They're different people too. That'll be super fun. Until then, Andy, I think I've got to go to bed.
All right, well, I got to go pitch a client on a new commercial. It is the end-all be-all, and America is ready for it.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
I got a 2-star. 2-star coming in from William in August 2013, and he says something that I don't think people say enough about movies. He says the film is way too focused on the main character. I mean, That is the kind of careful critique. No, I give William trouble. That is not where it ends. I will continue. The film is way too focused on the main character, who does not exemplify any heroic virtues, and yet he is the protagonist who wins at the end, giving the plot some confusion. The film portrays the other aspects of the story very well, the activists, the oppressors, the challenge, but not enough to give the audience a real sense of understanding. Perhaps if it had focused less on the main individual.
Oh, wow.
You know what's funny is I feel like he's trying to say my big criticism about the last two films, that this was like maybe should have chosen a different voice to carry this movie. But I applaud this review for the way it approached this particular criticism. Way too focused on the protagonist.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, I've got a 1 star by Robert Rosen, who says, unhappy with film. Now, I don't know if Robert is just unhappy with film. He's just unhappy with film in general.
The media.
And maybe he just gives 1 stars across the board, and he says this on all of them. Unhappy with film.
Too many chemicals. It's just, yes, no. He felt like he had to Amazon sent him a negative. He had to develop it himself. Oh, thanks, Amazon. It is hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
Oh, I know. You're telling me. Producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great conversations.
In Season 6, our Disease Films series had adaptations like The Omega Man, based on I Am Legend, The Andromeda Strain, Children of Men, and Blindness.
I Am Legend is so much better than The Omega Man.
What about the Will Smith version?
Don't get me started.
For our This Is Real Life Jack series, we talked Black Hawk Down and Seabiscuit, some great true stories based on fantastic books.
And we had more listeners' choices like The Fly, The Emigrants, and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
You just did a series on The Fly on the Sitting in the Dark podcast. Did you read the original material?
Wasn't watching every Fly movie enough?
Our Big Betty Davis series featured adaptations like The Little Foxes, Now Voyager, All About Eve, and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Are you calling Betty Davis big?
Only in personality and force.
She is a force to be reckoned with.
We talked about the entire The Godfather trilogy, of course. Iconic page to screen, even if it is just the one Mario Puzo book. I wonder if Coppola will ever make The Sicilian.
We also had some Zhang Yimou adaptations with Judo and Raise the Red Lantern. Absolutely gorgeous movies.
And don't forget the Hughes Brothers series with From Hell, based on the graphic novel. Brilliant material.
Kelly Reichardt gave us Wendy and Lucy and Certain Women, adapted from short stories.
Plus more Hayao Miyazaki as we tackled Howl's Moving Castle.
Find all these books and more at thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports the show.
Get the full list of adapted films that we've covered at thenextreel.com/originals and start your next read today.